This billionaire built a tech empire, but it was a waitress in a roadside diner who taught him how to connect with his own son. Grant Ellison didn't cry at his wife's funeral. He didn't cry when the doctor said, "Your son may never speak." But that afternoon, stuck in traffic outside Spokane, Washington, with his tie yanked halfway down his chest and his son screaming in the back seat, Grant came the closest he'd ever come. His knuckles turned white around the steering wheel, not from anger, from helplessness, from exhaustion that lived deep in his bones, from pretending like he was still the man who used to know what to do. Miles was kicking the back of his seat, fists clenched, face red and wailing. Not tantrum crying. It was pain, overwhelm, a world too loud, too fast, too much, and no way to say it. "Miles, buddy, please," Grant said, voice cracking as he reached behind his seat with one hand, trying to soothe him. "We're almost there, okay? Just hold on." But Miles couldn't hear reason, or wouldn't. His body jerked as if he was fighting gravity itself. His arms flailed, his sobs turned guttural. Grant pulled off the highway and into the parking lot of a tiny, rust-colored diner he hadn't noticed until just now. No time to look at stars or reviews. He just needed a break. They both did. The sign above the door read, "Rita's Home Kitchen." The kind of place where the menu probably hadn't changed in 30 years. And neither had the coffee. But it didn't matter. He killed the engine, looked in the rearview mirror. "Miles, we're gonna go inside, okay? Just breathe, in and out." His son's head was pressed against the window, tear-streaked face, mute, chest heaving. Grant closed his eyes, let out a long breath, and whispered, "I'm trying, kid. I swear I'm trying." He unclipped Miles's seatbelt, hoisted his 7-year-old into his arms, all 60 pounds of thrashing, grunting emotion, and carried him inside like a tired firefighter carrying his last rescue. A small bell rang as the door opened. Heads turned. A fork clinked against a plate. An old man in a Seahawks hat blinked over his coffee. A middle-aged couple paused mid-bite. Grant felt every stare like a spotlight. He sat Miles at a corner booth, farthest from the windows, trying to block out the fluorescent lights with his jacket. His son rocked gently, tapping his palms against his knees. Small, repetitive slaps that echoed across the vinyl seat. The waitress hadn't come over yet, which was fine. Grant needed a second. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, ran his hands down his face, and whispered, "I don't know what you need, Miles. I don't know how to help you anymore." No answer. Not from Miles, not from the universe, and definitely not from the job waiting for him back in Seattle. The board members who watched him like a hawk, pretending they respected him while waiting for him to crash and burn. They didn't care that he was a widower, or that his son barely slept, or that his whole life felt like one giant plate balanced on one finger. He glanced across the table. Miles was still rocking, but quieter now. Progress? Maybe. He reached into the diaper bag, applesauce, a spoon, a napkin. "Here you go, buddy," he said, peeling the foil top. "Your favorite, right?" He held out the spoon. Miles didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge him at all, just kept rocking. A couple of seconds passed, then a couple more. The spoon in Grant's hand started to tremble, just slightly, but enough. He dropped it. It clattered against the table, and without meaning to, without planning it, Grant whispered, "I can't do this." But someone had been watching, and that someone was already walking toward them. The footsteps were soft, deliberate. No rush, no judgment. Grant didn't look up at first, too drained to deal with pity, or worse, advice. "Mind if I clean this up for you?" a voice asked gently. Female, young, maybe mid-20s, calm, like she wasn't fazed by the scene she'd just walked into. He looked up. The waitress had deep brown skin, short natural curls, tucked under a red bandana, and a name tag that read D. Brooks. She was holding a wet rag in one hand and a smile that didn't feel forced. Grant gave a tired nod. "Yeah, sorry about the mess." She leaned over and wiped up the applesauce spill. "No worries. That booth's seen worse." Then, crouching slightly so she was eye level with Miles, she added, "Hey there, little man." Miles didn't respond, just kept tapping his knees. She didn't flinch, didn't recoil, just studied him. Not like he was broken, but like he was speaking a different language she understood. "What's his name?" she asked, her voice still low. "Miles," Grant replied, unsure why he was even still talking. "He's 7. She smiled at Miles. "You like applesauce, huh?" Again, no answer. But something in her tone, or her posture, made Grant pause. She wasn't being polite. She was trying. Actually trying. She turned slightly. "May I?" Grant blinked. "May you?" "Try feeding him." He hesitated. His instinct was to say no, that it wouldn't work, that she didn't know what she was getting into, but something in her eyes. There was no pity, no performance, just patience. He nodded slowly. "Go ahead." She sat down across from Miles, not directly in front of him. Slight angle, non-threatening. Then she hummed. Not a tune Grant recognized, just soft tones, like a lullaby with no words. And with her other hand, she picked up the spoon, scooped a bit of applesauce, then waited, and waited. No pressure, no rushing. Grant watched in stunned silence as Miles's eyes slowly lifted, first to the spoon, then to her face, a flicker of contact. He didn't smile, didn't speak, but he opened his mouth. She fed him. Grant stared. "Miles," he said, almost too quietly to hear. "You?" The boy swallowed. No fuss, no fight, just peace. The waitress smiled, like this was normal, like this kind of thing happened every day. "I'm Danielle," she said softly to the boy, brushing a crumb from his chin. "It's nice to meet you." Grant couldn't speak. His chest felt tight. He didn't know if he wanted to hug this woman or break down crying in the middle of a diner. Instead, he cleared his throat. "How did you know how to do that?" She kept her eyes on Miles. "My little brother, he's nonverbal too, 11 years old, grew up learning his cues like my ABCs. Grant exhaled. Long. "Wow." Danielle turned to him now, and there was something real behind her eyes. Not just kindness, but weariness too. The kind that comes from years of being overlooked, of knowing exactly what to do, and no one ever thinking to ask. "He's lucky," Grant said, nodding at her. "Your son?" "No," he said quietly. "Your brother." Danielle blinked, then smiled. Not big, just enough. A pause hung between them. Miles tapped his hand on the table now, quieter, calmer, focused. Danielle handed Grant the spoon. "You want to try?" He took it, slowly, scooped, shaky hand. Miles opened his mouth again, accepted it, just like that. And Grant felt something deep crack open inside him. Relief, guilt, gratitude. All at once, he whispered, "I haven't seen him eat in public in over a year." Danielle nodded, like she understood without needing more details. "Most people don't get it," Grant added. "They think it's just bad parenting." "I know," she said. "You ever work with autistic kids professionally?" "Nope, just my brother. And a couple neighbors' kids. Why?" Grant didn't answer right away, but an idea had just planted itself, one he couldn't ignore, no matter how crazy it sounded. They sat like that for a few minutes. No rush, no small talk. Grant fed Miles one slow spoonful at a time. Danielle watched without hovering, her hands resting on her apron, her expression unreadable, calm but not detached. It wasn't until Miles stopped and leaned his head against the booth that she quietly stood up. "I'll give you 2 a minute," she said. "I'll bring some water. No charge." Grant nodded, still trying to process what just happened. "Thanks." As she walked away, he looked at his son again, still awake but resting, not agitated, not in distress, just tired. For the first time in weeks, Grant wasn't panicking about what came next. He wasn't worried about meltdowns, about judgmental stares, about trying to explain his son's silence to strangers who didn't care. And somehow, it was because of her. When Danielle came back with the water, Grant gestured to the empty seat. "Do you have a second?" She hesitated, glanced toward the kitchen. "Technically, I'm on break in 5. "Sit now. I'll pay for your time." She raised an eyebrow. "You really think I need a bribe to sit down and talk to you?" Grant actually smiled, a rare thing these days. "No, but I've learned that nothing in life is free." She set the glass down, slid into the seat across from him. Sometimes people just help because it's the right thing to do. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "What's your brother's name?" "Malik." "How's he doing?" "Better now. He's got a routine. School helps. He doesn't talk, but he laughs when I sing Return of the Mac. He's a 90s baby trapped in a kid's body." Grant chuckled. "I know the feeling." They paused again. He could feel it. That strange shift where a conversation stops being about small things and starts digging deeper. Not on purpose. Just naturally. "So," she said, "what's your story?" He took a breath. "Grant Ellison. I run a tech company. Big one. West Coast. My wife passed away 3 years ago. Brain aneurysm. No warning." Danielle's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "I've been raising Miles on my own since then, trying to juggle meetings and therapy appointments. Most days I feel like I'm failing at both." She didn't offer him sympathy. She just said, "But you keep showing up." He looked down at his son. "Because what choice do I have?" Danielle shook her head. "That's not nothing, Grant. A lot of people run." He sighed. "Sometimes I think about it. Not running forever, just 5 minutes. Somewhere quiet, where no one needs me for anything." She smiled sadly. "I get that." He studied her now. Not just a waitress. Not just a girl who knew how to help his son. There was something else there. Resilience. Like someone who had been carrying heavy things for a long time and still stood tall. "What else do you do?" he asked. "Outside of this place?" She laughed a little. "You mean after I scrub ketchup off menus and deal with grumpy truckers?" "Yeah, after that. I take online classes, social work, slow because money's tight, but I'll get there. You ever think about working with kids, families?" She shrugged. "If someone gave me the chance." Grant leaned forward, his voice lowering. "What if I said I have a foundation under my company for children with developmental disabilities? Not some corporate PR move, something real. But I don't know what I'm doing with it. I just fund it and hope it helps." She tilted her head. "What are you saying?" "I need someone like you. Someone who actually knows what this looks like outside of a textbook." Danielle blinked. "Wait, are you offering me a job?" "Not right this second. I'm offering you a conversation, a meeting, a chance." She stared at him for a second, maybe 2, then said, "You don't even know me." "I know what I saw. You calmed my son in 30 seconds. That's more than I've done all year." She hesitated. "I can't just leave my job." "I'm not asking you to. Not yet. Just come visit the city, spend a weekend. Let me show you the foundation." "And what if I say no?" "Then I still owe you lunch." Danielle smirked. "Throw in some pie and I'll think about it." Grant smiled. "Deal." But what neither of them knew was that this meeting wasn't random. It was about to change everything. Danielle didn't give him an answer right away. They finished lunch. Well, Miles finished 2 more spoonfuls before drifting into a deep, almost dreamlike nap in the booth. His body leaned against his father's side, small breaths fogging the window beside him. Grant hadn't moved in 10 minutes. He was afraid if he shifted, the moment would vanish. Danielle brought over a slice of warm peach pie and slid it across the table. No plate for herself, just a fork and a smirk. "You gonna keep staring out the window, or are you gonna ask me more questions about my life?" she teased. Grant blinked, coming back to earth. "Right. Sorry, I just, He glanced down at his son. "It's been a long time since I've seen him this relaxed." Danielle didn't say, "You're welcome." She didn't need to. Instead, she pulled the fork from the napkin and asked, "So tell me, what's it like running a company while raising a kid who needs more than most?" He exhaled through his nose, a tired laugh escaping. "It's like juggling knives, blindfolded, while people judge you for bleeding." Danielle nodded slowly. "I feel that." "You ever take care of Malik on your own?" "All the time. My mom works night shifts at the hospital. Dad left when I was 12. It's mostly me when he's in a mood." "You ever lose it?" She chuckled. "I once cried because he refused to wear socks. Socks. I was sitting on the floor holding a pair of Spider-Man socks. sobbing like someone had died. Grant let out a real laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was true. He leaned back. I yelled at Miles once, just once, after a really bad day. He was having a meltdown, throwing things, and I just snapped. I yelled, not loud, but harsh, and the look he gave me, he paused. He didn't understand my words, but he felt them. It wrecked me. Danielle's voice softened. You apologized? Of course. Then you taught him something that even grown-ups mess up, but we make it right. He looked at her differently then, like she wasn't just some kind waitress with a good heart, like she was wise, like she'd seen the corners of life most people skipped over. Danielle broke the silence again. You ever wish he was just typical? Grant hesitated, then with shame in his voice. Yeah, I do. Not because I don't love him exactly the way he is, but because I want the world to be kind to him, and I know it won't be. Danielle tapped her fork against the edge of the plate. When Malik was 5, some kid at the park called him a weirdo. I wanted to snatch that little boy by his collar. Grant raised an eyebrow. Did you? She grinned. No, his mom beat me to it, snatched him up so fast I almost applauded. They both laughed, quiet, controlled, but full of weight. Danielle leaned in now, more serious. You said earlier that you don't know what you're doing with that foundation. I don't. Then maybe it needs someone who's seen it from the ground level, someone who's not reading from a file, but living it day to day. That's why I brought it up, he said. But here's the thing, Grant. I've spent my life helping my brother, quietly, behind the scenes. I've never had a title or paycheck for it. I wouldn't even know where to start in a place like yours. He studied her. You don't need a title to know your worth. She looked away. You'd be surprised how many people disagree with that. Grant paused, then without flinching said, Fly out next weekend. I'll cover everything, no expectations, just see it. If it's not for you, I'll never ask again. Danielle tapped her fingers against the table, thoughtful. Then slowly she nodded. All right, 1 weekend, no promises. He extended his hand. Deal. She shook it. You're lucky I like airplanes. And pie. He smiled, but he still didn't realize that this woman wasn't just here to help his son. She was about to help him in a way no one else ever had. Grant wasn't the same man when he got back to Seattle. Something had shifted, and not just emotionally. That weekend with Danielle, even though she'd only agreed to observe, cracked open doors he hadn't even known were locked. She walked through the foundation's headquarters like she'd been there for years. Didn't flinch when people asked technical questions, didn't pretend to know things she didn't. But when she did speak, people listened, because her words weren't theories, they were lived experience. Grant watched the staff, all degrees and credentials, slowly realized that the smartest person in the room might have just walked out of a diner in Spokane. They gave her a tour. She gave them real stories, from the waiting rooms, from the school meetings, from the nights Malik screamed for hours, and she had to figure it out without Google or a specialist. And when the weekend ended, Grant didn't ask her to stay, because she beat him to it. I want in, she said, but on one condition. Name it. I'm not going to be your token from the ground up hire. I want a seat at the table. I want to build programs that actually help families like mine. And I want to bring in people who look like me, who never get invited to rooms like this. Grant stared at her. You're serious? As a sensory overload meltdown in a grocery store. He cracked a smile. Done. And just like that, Danielle Brooks became Director of Community Partnerships. No resume, no fancy title. But she didn't need it. Her first order of business, cancel every upcoming panel of experts and replace it with parents, siblings, caregivers, people with autism who could speak for themselves. Grant's board pushed back. This isn't protocol. We need vetted professionals. Are you sure this isn't just emotional bias? Danielle listened to every critique, then calmly replied, I'm not against degrees. I'm just saying you don't need a PhD to understand how a screaming child in a public restroom can break a parent's spirit. Silence. She wasn't trying to burn the system down. She was building a new one next to it. 1 week turned into 2. 2 turned into a month. And in that time, something else changed. Not just at the office, but at home, Miles. He started sleeping through the night, not every night, but more than before. He picked up a fork, held it, used it, without a meltdown. He leaned into his father's arms instead of pulling away, and one morning, the one that almost made Grant drop his coffee mug, Miles looked him in the eye, reached out, and touched his hand. No words, but he chose the connection. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fast, but it was real, and Grant knew, deep in his gut, that Danielle had something to do with it. Not directly. She wasn't a miracle worker, but her presence had made him better, a better listener, a softer speaker, a man who no longer measured success in quarterly earnings, but in quiet mornings and unfinished applesauce cups. One Friday, he walked into Danielle's office. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, typing on a laptop, hoodie pulled over her curls. He knocked on the doorframe. "You're making me look bad, you know." She didn't look up. "You were already losing before I got here." He laughed. "Fair." She closed the laptop and stretched. "What's up?" "I'm thinking about a road tour, town halls in small cities, talking to parents who never get heard, real stories, real needs." Her eyebrows lifted. "You mean leave your kingdom and actually listen to the people?" "Exactly," Danielle grinned. "Look at you turning into a decent human being." "It's uncomfortable," he admitted. "Growth usually is." But the more they worked together, the more it became clear. This connection wasn't just professional, and neither of them knew what to do about that. It started small. Grant began looking for excuses to visit Danielle's office. A quick update, a check-in, a shared snack from the vending machine. Danielle noticed, but she didn't say anything. Not at first. She'd seen the shift. The way his shoulders dropped around her, the way his voice lost that tight, clipped edge he used in meetings, how he laughed now. Not forced or polite, but from somewhere deeper. They both ignored it, because the work came first. They spent the next 2 months organizing the road tour. Idaho Falls, Modesto, Wichita. Cities that didn't make headlines, where autism support programs were either underfunded or non-existent. Danielle handled the local outreach. Grant scheduled the logistics. Together, they sat in rec centers, church basements, and school auditoriums. And they listened. Parents told stories of being kicked out of grocery stores. Teachers shared the heartbreak of losing kids because there weren't enough aides. Grandmothers cried over having to choose between a second job and a therapy appointment. Grant wrote every word down. Danielle hugged people when they couldn't speak. One night, after a session in Missoula, Montana, they found themselves walking side by side outside the hotel. The sky above them was massive, stars shining in every direction. Danielle kicked a loose pebble on the sidewalk. "You ever think about how quiet it gets out here?" "I used to hate it," Grant said. "Now I crave it." She glanced at him. "Why?" "Because my head's loud, work, guilt, Miles. I can't turn it off." They stopped walking. Danielle looked at him for a moment. "You're doing a good job, you know." He gave a weak smile. "I'm trying." "You don't need to try so hard around me." That landed heavy. They stood there, two people who had never planned on being in each other's lives. Two people pulled together by a child, a moment, a spoonful of applesauce. "Danielle," he said, his voice low. She looked up. "I think about you, more than I probably should." She didn't flinch. "I think about you too." A beat passed, but neither moved, because it was complicated. Grant was a father, a CEO, a man still learning how to be present. Danielle was focused, grounded, protective of her independence. She didn't want to be someone's project or someone's escape. So instead of doing anything stupid, they walked back to the hotel in silence. No regrets, just timing. Back in Seattle, things didn't slow down. The foundation's visibility exploded. Danielle's programs were getting attention. Donations increased. A journalist from Portland ran a piece calling her the heart of Ellison's engine. She hated that. "I'm not a machine part," she told Grant. He laughed. "Well, the part runs better when you're here." Danielle smiled, but only a little. "Don't say stuff like that unless you mean it." He met her eyes. "I meant it." There was a pause, and just when it seemed like they might finally talk about it, all of it, Miles ran into the room. He was barefoot, holding a toy dinosaur, smiling, and speaking just one word. "Hi." Danielle turned sharply, stunned. Grant's mouth fell open. "Miles," he whispered. "Say it again." Miles didn't repeat it, but he didn't need to. Danielle crouched down and gently reached out her hand. Miles walked over, placed the dinosaur in her palm. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked up at Grant. "That's the first time he's ever said hi?" "First word. Ever," Grant whispered. No applause, no cameras, just the three of them, in a room, breathing. Miles leaned into her shoulder. She didn't speak. She just held him, carefully, gently. And in that moment, Grant knew. This wasn't business anymore. This wasn't luck or fate or timing. This was something real, something solid. But real feelings come with real fears. And both of them were still holding on to something that might ruin everything. 2 weeks passed. Danielle took some time off, just a few days, to visit her mother and Malik back in Spokane. She didn't say it, but Grant could feel the hesitation in her voice when she left. He tried not to read into it, but every day she was gone, something felt off. The office was fine. Miles was fine. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. He sat at his desk late one night, staring at a half-written email. It was supposed to be an update for the board. Instead, he kept writing and deleting the same sentence. "I miss her." Not just because she was good at her job, but because when she was around, he was better, more patient, more human. When Danielle returned, she walked into the office like she hadn't just knocked the air out of his chest. "I brought you something," she said, dropping a small paper bag on his desk. He opened it. Inside was a single red sock, kid-sized, with Spider-Man on the front. Grant blinked. "Is this?" Malik wore it, first time, no screaming, no drama. "I figured you'd appreciate the milestone." Grant smiled. "I do. Thank you." She stood there for a second, arms crossed. "You okay?" He looked up at her, and this time he didn't dance around it. "No, I'm not." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Talk to me." He stood up and walked around the desk. "I've spent my whole life building things. Companies, products, teams. Because I thought if I could control something, then the chaos wouldn't win. Then Miles would be safe. Then maybe I could breathe." Danielle didn't interrupt. "But I can't control him, or grief, or the fact that the one person who makes all of this feel manageable might decide she doesn't want to be here anymore." Her face softened. "You think I'm leaving?" she asked. He shrugged. "I think I wouldn't blame you if you did." Danielle walked closer. "You're a mess, Grant." "I know. And I didn't ask for any of this." "I know that too. But I stayed." He looked at her, eyes tired but wide open. "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a crayon drawing, stick figures, a small boy, a tall man, and a woman with curly hair. 3 figures, holding hands. "Miles drew this," she said, "yesterday. No one told him to." Grant stared at it. He couldn't breathe for a second. "He sees you," Danielle said. "He sees us." That's when it broke. All the walls, the guilt, the pretending. Tears welled in his eyes, and this time, he let them fall. Danielle stepped forward and placed her hand over his heart. "You don't have to do it alone anymore." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to, because the real love, the kind that sticks, grows slowly, like trust, like healing. That night, Grant went home, tucked Miles into bed, and sat beside him for a long while, just listening to him breathe. And for the first time since his wife passed, he didn't feel like he was chasing some version of himself he'd never find again. He felt present, imperfect, but present. And that was enough. Life doesn't give us perfect timing. It gives us people, sometimes strangers, who walk in at the exact moment we need them, whether we're ready or not. Sometimes, all it takes is one kind act. One spoonful of applesauce. One person who sees what others overlook. If you've got someone like that in your life, hold on to them. And if you can be that person for someone else, do it. Because what you think is small might just change someone's entire world. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, kindness doesn't require a plan. just a choice.